Hi, it's Hannah. This is our new story. Thanks for watching. Red wine was running down my face. A glass of expensive Cabernet soaked into my white silk blouse. A young blonde woman was yelling, saying her husband owned this restaurant and she could kick out anyone she wanted. About 50 people were staring at me like I was part of the night's show. And in that moment, the only thing I could think was how badly wine stains. I really loved that blouse. I didn't yell back. I didn't cry. I didn't give her what she wanted. I calmly wiped my face with a napkin, looked at her one last time, and said the only thing that mattered. I hope that helped you feel better. Then I picked up my purse, apologized to my client for the interruption, and walked out of the restaurant with whatever pride I still had. My name is Hannah Calder. I'm 34 years old. And the woman who just embarrassed me in front of a full restaurant. She's my ex-husband's new wife. That restaurant she was shouting about, the one she claims belongs to her. I designed every part of it. Paid for it. I built it with 7 years of my life. But this story doesn't begin with wine on my face. It starts almost 10 years ago when I was young, naive, and believed love was enough. I met Ethan Rowe at a food festival when I was 25, fresh out of design school, full of dreams, completely sure the world would be kind to me. He was 32, a sous chef at a decent restaurant, and he talked about food like it was art. He told me about his dream of opening his own restaurant one day. A real place, full of heart and passion. I fell for him completely. We were married within a year. When my grandmother passed away, she left me $180,000, her entire life savings. Grandma Elaine. She had been a retired accountant who had gone through a terrible divorce in the 70s. Her first husband had hidden everything and left her with nothing. She spent the rest of her life being careful with money, keeping track of every detail, and never fully trusting anyone. She never liked Ethan. She said he was too charming, just like my grandfather had been. At the time, I thought she was being paranoid, old-fashioned, overly cautious. When I told her I wanted to use the inheritance to help Ethan open his restaurant, she didn't say no. But she insisted on a small formality. She made us sign a promissory note with legal words about ownership percentages and equity stakes. I was 25 and in love. I signed it without really reading it, put it away with old tax returns and birthday cards, and forgot all about it. Grandma passed away 3 years later. Heart attack in her sleep. Peaceful, they said. I cried for weeks, but I never thought about that document again. I was too busy building the amber table. That was the name of Ethan's dream. I designed every inch of the interior. The warm lights, the exposed brick, the amber-colored glass fixtures that gave the restaurant its name. I created the logo, the menus, the brand. I worked 16-hour days alongside him for 3 years while the restaurant struggled to survive. I didn't take a salary. I didn't ask for recognition. I believed we were building something together. Then finally it started to work. In year 4 we made a profit. Year 5 we were featured in a local magazine. Year 6 we expanded the dining room. By year 7, the Amber Table was the city's most talked about restaurant. That's also when Ethan began working late. I found texts on his phone by accident. I wasn't even suspicious at first. I just picked up the wrong phone when mine buzzed. Her name was Brittany. She was 24, blonde, and had been working as a waitress at our restaurant for 6 months. Our restaurant. That's still what I called it. Then Ethan didn't even properly apologize. He said we had grown apart. He said he needed something different. He said it wasn't my fault, which is what people say when it really is your fault, but they don't want to feel guilty. He filed for divorce. His lawyer was expensive and aggressive. Mine was what I could afford, which wasn't much. During the proceedings, Ethan showed financial papers claiming the restaurant was barely making money. $30,000 a year in profit. He said the business was struggling. He said there wasn't much to split. I knew it was a lie. I'd seen the reservations, the crowds, the expansion. But proving it would have needed a forensic accountant. And they cost at least $10,000. Money I didn't have. Money I couldn't borrow. So, I settled for $40,000 and our modest house with its modest mortgage. He kept the restaurant. All of it. 3 months after the divorce, he married Brittany. She posted wedding photos on Instagram with a caption that said, "Blessed beyond measure." I saw it because I was weak and looked. Then I blocked them both and promised myself I'd move on. That was 14 months ago. I thought I had moved on. I was slowly rebuilding my design business, taking small clients, paying bills, trying not to think about the life I had lost. My cat became my only dinner companion, which honestly was an upgrade. Unlike Ethan, she actually listened when I talked and never once told me to calm down, which instantly made her better company than most men I had dated. So, how did I end up at the amber table on that? How did I end up at the amber table that night, getting wine thrown in my face? I had a meeting with a potential client. Raymond Talbot, 58, owned a chain of boutique hotels and was looking for a designer to renovate his newest property. This was the biggest chance in my struggling career. His assistant made the reservation at the most talked-about restaurant in town. I didn't know where we were going until my taxi pulled up and I saw the sign. My stomach sank. I almost told the driver to keep going, but I couldn't cancel on this client. So I went inside, asked for a corner table, and silently prayed I could make it through dinner without being noticed. I almost did. Then Brittany saw my name on the reservation list. I learned later that she had spent months stalking my social media during and after the affair. She knew exactly what I looked like. She had been studying me like insecure women study the ones who came before them. She waited until I was mid-conversation with Raymond, then came over to our table with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She asked if I was enjoying her restaurant. I stayed polite, said the food was lovely, and hoped she would walk away. She didn't. She escalated, called me pathetic, said I had some nerve showing my face there. Then she grabbed my wine glass and threw it right at my face. The whole restaurant went silent. I could have screamed. I could have cried. I could have told everyone within earshot exactly who built that restaurant and who paid for it. But I didn't. I just wiped the wine from my eyes, looked at her calmly and walked out. Raymond followed me outside. He insisted on paying for my dry cleaning. He apologized like it was his fault, and looked at me with something I hadn't. I had suspicions, plenty of them. But suspicions don't pay for experts. Contingency lawyer changed everything. If Noreen Cassidy took my case, I wouldn't pay unless we won. For the first time since the divorce, the door was actually open. I called her office the next morning and made an appointment. Just a consultation, I told myself. I wasn't committing to anything. I was just asking questions. I spent the 3 days before the meeting preparing like I was taking the bar exam. I read every bank statement I had kept 3 times. I organized files by date, made color-coded tabs, and created a timeline of our marriage and business on a legal pad. I wasn't this prepared for my own wedding. Then again, maybe that had been the problem all along. That week, I also started keeping a dedicated folder. Every screenshot I could find, every receipt, every financial document that crossed my path. My grandmother always used to say that paper remembers what people choose to forget. I never really understood until I needed it to be true. Noreen Cassidy's office was not what I expected. No fancy high-rise, no leather chairs, no wall of intimidating law degrees. Just a modest suite in a professional building with clean carpets and neatly organized files. Clearly, this was a woman who spent money on work, not appearances. Noreen herself was 49, sharp-eyed and direct. No small talk. No pleasantries beyond a firm handshake and an offer of water. She sat across from me with a yellow legal pad and said 4 words that set the tone for everything. Tell me everything. Leave nothing out. So I did. The whole story from the beginning. Meeting Ethan, falling in love, investing my grandmother's money, building the restaurant, 7 years of marriage, discovering the affair, the divorce, the settlement, the viral video, the wine in my face. I talked for almost an hour. Noreen took notes and asked sharp questions, but never interrupted. When I finished, she asked the question that changed everything. How exactly did you give him the money? I explained that my grandmother had left me $180,000, and I gave it to Ethan to open the restaurant. Noreen leaned forward. Was there any documentation? Any written agreement about the investment? I started to say no. We were married. Why would there be? But then I stopped. A memory came back. Fuzzy at first, then clearer. Grandma Elaine sitting at her kitchen table, sliding a document across to me, insisting I sign it before she would write the check. I told Noreen about my grandmother, how she had been an accountant her whole life, how her first husband had hidden assets during their divorce in 1973 and left her with nothing, and how she had spent the rest of her life being careful, documenting everything, and trusting no one completely, especially not charming men. When I asked for my inheritance early, Grandma agreed, but she insisted on a small formality, a kind of promissory note with legal words I didn't understand and didn't bother to read. I was 25, madly in love, certain my marriage would last forever. I signed it, filed it with old papers, and forgot it existed. Grandma passed away 3 years later. She never reminded me about the document. Maybe she assumed I'd remember when I needed it. Maybe she trusted me more than I deserved. Noreen's expression changed. She asked if I still had that document. I honestly didn't know. Had been almost 10 years. I'd moved twice since then, but I thought it might be in storage with the boxes I'd labeled Grandma's stuff and never properly sorted. Noreen told me to find it. Whatever else I was doing, finding that document became my top priority. I went home and spent the entire weekend searching. My apartment turned into a mess of cardboard boxes and old papers, tax returns from years ago, birthday cards I had kept for no reason, photos from a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. I almost gave up twice. My back ached. My eyes were tired. I was starting to think the document had been thrown away years ago during some cleaning I couldn't remember. Then, in the last box, under my grandmother's recipe collection and a stack of angry letters she had written to Nixon but never sent, I found it. A single page, slightly yellowed at the edges, dated almost 10 years ago. The language was formal, typed on what looked like a template, but the signatures at the bottom were handwritten. Mine and Ethan's. I read it slowly this time. Really read it. The document was a promissory note acknowledging receipt of $180,000 for investment in a restaurant venture. But that wasn't the important part. The important part was a clause halfway down the page. In consideration for this investment, recipient agrees that investor shall hold a 40% equity stake in the business upon establishment. 40%. My grandmother hadn't just given Ethan money. She had made him agree that I owned almost half of whatever we built with it, and she had it notarized by her attorney friend, making it legally binding. I sat on my floor, surrounded by boxes, and cried. Not sad tears, just overwhelming ones. My grandmother had protected me from beyond the grave, and I had been too young and naive to even realize it. I brought the document to Noreen the next day. She read it twice, then leaned back in her chair and said something I'll never forget. Your grandmother was a very smart woman. Then she explained what the document meant in legal terms. This wasn't just about Ethan being dishonest during the divorce. This was about him being legally required to register me as a 40% owner of the Amber Table. He never did. Instead, he claimed 100% ownership when the restaurant was incorporated. Then he claimed the same 100% during our divorce, showing the court financials that made the business look almost worthless. What he did wasn't just unfair, it was fraud. Possibly theft. Definitely actionable. But there was a complication. Noreen said that to prove the value of what Ethan had taken from me, we'd have to prove the real value of the business. He had shown the court during the divorce that the restaurant made $30,000 a year in profit. If we proved it actually made much more than that, we wouldn't just be proving divorce fraud. We'd be proving he had underreported income to the court. And if he underreported to the court, he probably underreported to the IRS too. Noreen looked at me directly. Are you prepared for where this might go? I understood what she was asking. Did I want justice badly enough to potentially send my ex-husband to prison? Thought about it. I really did. Part of me remembered the man I had married. The one who made me laugh, who talked about food like poetry, who held my hand at my grandmother's funeral. But then I remembered something else. An interview he gave to a local magazine 6 months after our divorce. I had read it during a weak moment, torturing myself the way you do when you're not fully healed. The interviewer asked about his success, and Ethan said the words that burned themselves into my memory. I built this restaurant from nothing with my own 2 hands. My money, my design, my 7 years of unpaid work. His nothing. I looked at Noreen and asked, "What do we do first?" She almost smiled. "First, we file a petition to reopen the divorce settlement based on newly discovered evidence and fraud. That's the civil case. Whatever else happens depends on what the investigation shows." He nodded. For the first time in 14 months, I felt like I was moving forward instead of just surviving. Noreen asked if I had any other documents from my grandmother. I told her just recipes and some very angry letters about Nixon that she never sent. Noreen said the recipes probably wouldn't help our case, but she appreciated a woman who kept thorough records. The legal process started quietly. No dramatic announcements, no public confrontations. Just paperwork and patience. Noreen filed the petition to reopen my divorce settlement in week 6. The grounds were simple. Newly discovered evidence and fraud. I submitted my grandmother's promissory note along with a detailed statement explaining why I hadn't known about it during the original divorce. The document had been lost in storage for years, forgotten in the chaos of a marriage ending. This filing became a public record, which meant Ethan would find out. Noreen had warned me about that from the beginning, but she also said it didn't matter. Once the petition was filed, he would have to respond through legal channels. No more Instagram statements. No more controlling the story. The court doesn't care about public relations. In week 7, Noreen brought in a forensic accountant named Victor Webb. He was in his early 60s, wore reading glasses on a chain around his neck, and had spent 30 years examining financial records in fraud cases. He worked on contingency for situations like mine, cases where the evidence of wrongdoing was strong enough that he knew he'd eventually get paid. Victor requested financial discovery as part of reopening the divorce. All restaurant records, bank statements, tax returns, supplier invoices, payroll documents. Ethan's lawyer fought it, of course. Filed motions to delay, claimed the request was too broad, called it harassment. But the judge granted partial discovery. We got access to bank statements and tax returns going back 5 years. Victor found inconsistencies within days. The restaurant had reported $30,000 in yearly profit during my divorce, but the bank deposits told a different story. Revenue was much higher than what was on the tax returns. Supplier payments didn't match reported food costs. There were regular cash withdrawals with no documented expenses. Classic signs of double bookkeeping. Victor told me someone was keeping 2 sets of records, one for the IRS and the courts, one for reality. In week 10, something interesting happened. Noreen got a phone call from Ethan's attorney. A very polite, professional call, offering to settle the matter quietly. $30,000, case closed, no admission of wrongdoing. Mr. Holloway just wanted to avoid a long, stressful legal fight. Everyone involved. Noreen presented the offer to me without giving advice. It was my choice. I thought about it seriously. $30,000 was real money. It could pay off my credit cards, give me a cushion, let me breathe easier. And accepting it would mean it was over. No more lawyers, no more digging through the past, no more risk. But here's the thing about settlement offers. If someone is willing to pay you to stop looking at their finances, it usually means there's something worth finding. I told Noreen to decline. No counteroffer, no explanation, no drama. Just a polite no thank you through proper legal channels. I found out later that Ethan threw a glass against his office wall when his lawyer delivered the news. Apparently, the charming restaurant owner had a temper when things didn't go his way. Funny how you can be married to someone for 7 years and never see that side of them. Or maybe I did see it and just convinced myself it was something else. Declining turned out to be the right choice because in week 11, we got an unexpected gift. A woman named Linda Moretti contacted Noreen's office. She had seen the local news coverage of my case. The viral video had made it a minor story, and the divorce petition filing had brought it back into the news cycle. Linda said she had information that might be relevant and wanted to talk. Noreen met with her first, then brought me in. Linda was 58 years old, gray-haired, and tired in a way that suggested she had been carrying something heavy for a long time. She had worked as the general manager at the Amber Table for 5 years. She had been there when I was still married to Ethan. She remembered me coming in during the early days, remembered the long hours I worked for free, remembered how the restaurant couldn't have survived without my design work and my grandmother's investment. She also remembered being fired 2 years ago. The official reason was performance issues. The real reason, Linda said, was that she had started asking questions about the accounting. She noticed cash transactions that never hit the register. A separate notebook Ethan kept in his office that didn't match the official books. Employees being paid partly in cash with instructions not to report it. When she raised concerns, Ethan called her into his office and told her her services were no longer needed. She was escorted out that same day after 5 years of loyalty. She didn't even get to say goodbye to the staff she had trained. Linda had been angry for 2 years. She had thought about going to the authorities herself, but didn't have enough evidence to prove anything. She was just a fired employee with a grudge. Who would believe her? But now there was an official investigation. Legitimate lawyers. Someone actually looking into what she had seen. She gave us everything she had. Names of other employees who might be willing to talk, dates and details of cash transactions she had witnessed, a description of the second ledger system she had seen in Ethan's office. She even remembered specific nights when the restaurant was packed, but the register showed barely any sales. Most importantly, she was willing to testify. In week 14, Victor Webb completed his forensic analysis. The report was devastating. Based on his examination of the records, the restaurant had underreported income by at least $150,000 annually. Over the 4 years of our marriage, when the restaurant was profitable, that added up to over $600,000 in unreported income. This wasn't just a divorce case anymore. This was tax evasion on a federal level. Noreen sat me down and explained my options. We could use this evidence as leverage to negotiate a much better divorce settlement and keep everything civil. Ethan would pay me what I was owed, and the tax problems would stay between him and his conscience. Or we could file a formal complaint with the IRS and let federal investigators do what they do. Option 2 meant I couldn't control what happened to Ethan. If the IRS found criminal conduct, he could face serious consequences. Fines, penalties, maybe prison. I asked Noreen what she would do. She said she couldn't tell me. It had to be my decision. I went home and thought about it for 2 days. Part of me still felt guilty. I remembered the man I had loved, the dreams we had shared, the life we had built together before it all fell apart. Did I really want to be the person who sent my ex-husband to federal prison? But then I thought about Linda. Fired for asking questions, 5 years of her life dismissed in a single afternoon. And I thought about the other employees, the ones paid under the table, who might have been cheated on taxes or benefits without knowing it. Ethan's fraud didn't just hurt me. It hurt everyone around him. I called Noreen and told her to file the complaint. She said she'd have it submitted by the end of the week. Then she asked if I was sure. I told her I had spent 7 years building a restaurant for a man who thanked me by stealing it. The least I could do was make sure he paid his taxes like everyone else. It seemed only fair. I certainly paid mine. This is where everything started moving fast. If you're still with me, thank you. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is a perfect time. I want you here for how this ends. In week 16, Ethan went on the attack. His lawyer filed a harassment lawsuit against me. The complaint was aggressive and ugly. It accused me of running a coordinated campaign to destroy his reputation and business. It cited the wine incident as proof that I had provoked his wife by showing up at the restaurant uninvited. It claimed I was giving false information to the media and making anonymous tips to government agencies. The lawsuit made local news again, Restaurant owner accuses ex-wife of harassment campaign. The online comments were brutal. Half said I was a bitter woman who couldn't let go. The other half said I was brave for fighting back. Neither side knew the full story. I'd be lying if I said it didn't shake me. For about 3 days I questioned everything. What if I lost? What if his expensive lawyers found a way to twist this and make me the villain? What if I ended up worse than where I started? Broke, publicly humiliated, with a harassment judgment on my record. I called Noreen in a panic. She let me talk for about 10 minutes, then said something that calmed me immediately. Innocent people don't file harassment lawsuits when someone asks to see their tax returns. This is desperation. He's trying to scare you into backing down because he knows what's coming. What was coming arrived in week 18. The IRS opened a formal investigation based on Noreen's complaint. This wasn't automatic. They reviewed our evidence and found it credible enough to pursue a real investigation with real federal agents. They were looking into everything Garrett had reported for the past 6 years. The investigation was completely separate from my divorce case, but they were connected in an important way. Whatever the IRS found would eventually become public record. And whatever became public record could be used in my civil case. Garrett hired a tax attorney. Then he hired another one. His legal bills started piling up fast, and unlike me, he couldn't work on contingency. Every hour from every lawyer cost him money. Money he was becoming increasingly desperate to protect. In week 20, Garrett received an official IRS inquiry letter. It was delivered to the restaurant by certified mail. The letter demanded all financial records for the past 6 years. Every bank statement, every tax return, every receipt, invoice and payroll document. His accountant called his lawyer. His lawyer called his tax attorney. His tax attorney called another tax attorney. The message was clear. This was serious. Do not destroy anything. Destroying documents is a federal crime. I heard about the letter from Noreen, who learned about it through legal channels. She said Garrett's legal team was in full panic mode. They knew exactly what the records would show. At this point, the only question was how much damage they could limit. But the most unexpected development came in week 22. And it didn't come from me or from the IRS. Came from Brittany. She'd been overhearing Garrett's phone calls for weeks. The quiet conversations with lawyers. The stress. The drinking, which had gotten worse since the investigation started. At first, Garrett brushed off her questions. It's nothing, he told her. Just my ex causing trouble. Don't worry about it. But Brittany wasn't stupid. Shallow maybe. Obsessed with status, definitely. But not stupid. She started paying attention. Doing her own research, reading about the case online, piecing together what was really happening. When she finally understood the scope, the unreported income, the potential federal charges, the fines that could wipe out everything, she did exactly what you'd expect someone like Brittany to do. She protected herself. In week 22, she filed for divorce. Irreconcilable differences. No drama, no public statements. Just a quiet filing that appeared in court records. She wanted out before his debts became her debts. The woman who had thrown wine in my face, who had screamed about her restaurant, her husband and her blessed life, was running for the exit the moment things got hard. I wish I could say I was surprised. Garrett was now fighting on 3 fronts. The divorce reopening case against me, the federal IRS investigation, and a new divorce from his new wife. His charming empire was collapsing faster than he could hold it together. In week 24, his lawyer gave him advice that spelled the end. Cooperate with the IRS. Fighting federal investigators was a losing game that ended in prison time. Cooperating meant fines, penalties, and probation, but probably no jail. Here was the trap he had built for himself. To cooperate with the IRS, he had to admit the real income figures. And admitting the real figures meant admitting he had lied during our divorce. Every lie was connected to the others. Pull one thread, and the whole thing unraveled. At 30, I was sitting at my desk, working on the final designs for Raymond Talbot's hotel renovation. My phone rang. Noreen, it's done, she said. He agreed to everything. I asked her to repeat that. She explained that Garrett's lawyers had negotiated a global settlement. In the civil case, I would receive 40% of the assessed business value, plus damages for the years of withheld profit sharing. The business was worth less now than it had been before the scandal, around $450,000. But my share still came to approximately $180,000, plus $85,000 in damages and legal costs. Total recovery: roughly $265,000. In the federal case, Garrett pleaded guilty to tax evasion charges. He received probation, over $200,000 in fines, and a record that would follow him forever. No prison, but his reputation was destroyed. Thank Noreen. She said I didn't need to thank her. You did the hard part, she reminded me. I hung up and sat quietly for a long time. No champagne. No celebration. No dramatic music swelling in the background. Just relief. Like finally putting down something heavy I'd carried for years and realizing my shoulders didn't have to hurt anymore. That night, I celebrated by ordering takeout from a restaurant that wasn't the Amber Table. The pad thai was mediocre, but at least nobody threw wine on me. Progress. The Amber Table sold 3 months later. Garrett had no choice. The fines and legal fees had drained everything. The restaurant that had been his dream, our dream, the thing I designed, funded, and built alongside him, went to a restaurant group from out of state. They paid 40 cents on the dollar. Desperation sale. The new owners reached out to me. They had read about the case and were curious about the woman who had originally designed the space. Would I be interested in consulting on a refresh? Politely declined. That chapter was closed. Some rooms you don't need to walk back into, no matter how good the lighting is. Let me tell you where everyone ended up. And then I'll let you go. Garrett. Last I heard, he was working at a chain restaurant outside the city. Not as a head chef, not even as a sous chef. Kitchen manager, which is a polite way of saying he orders supplies and makes sure the line cooks show up on time. He lives in a 1-bedroom apartment now, and he'll be paying fines and back taxes for years. The man who built this from nothing with his own 2 hands is currently building nothing at all. Brittany. Her divorce from Garrett finalized quickly. There wasn't much to fight over because there wasn't much left. She got nothing because there was nothing to get. I don't know where she is now. And honestly, I don't care. Some stories don't need an ending. Some people are just chapters you close. Linda Moretti, the woman who got fired for asking questions. She used her testimony and documents to file a wrongful termination lawsuit. Settled out of court for an amount she said was enough to finally take that trip to Italy. She sent me a thank you card and a bottle of wine. I kept the card and drank the wine. Much better than the Merlot Brittany threw at me. Raymond Talbot. He became my biggest client and eventually a friend. His hotel renovation won a regional design award. At the ceremony, he introduced me as the most resilient person he had ever met. I told him resilience was just stubbornness with better marketing. Me. I used the settlement to open my own design studio. Small space, just me and one assistant. But it's mine. Really mine this time, with paperwork that says so. I specialize in restaurant interiors now. The irony isn't lost on me, but there's something satisfying about it too. I know this world. I know what makes a space work, what makes people want to stay, what makes a room feel like somewhere you belong. I'm not angry anymore. That surprised me the most. 4 months during the investigation, I thought I would feel triumphant when it was over. Vindicated, like I had won some great battle and could finally plant my flag. But that's not how it felt at all. 6 months after the settlement, I was having coffee at a small cafe near my studio. A young woman at the next table was on her phone, clearly stressed. I could hear bits of her conversation. Something about her boyfriend wanting her to invest in his business. Something about him promising to pay her back. Something about her not being sure, but not wanting to seem unsupportive. She hung up and stared at her coffee like it might have answers. I don't usually talk to strangers. I don't give advice to people who don't ask for it. But something about her face reminded me of myself at 25. Young, hopeful, absolutely certain that love would be enough to protect her. I caught her eye and smiled. Said just one thing before I paid my bill and left. "Whatever you decide, get it in writing and keep copies." She looked surprised for a moment, then nodded slowly. I don't know if she listened. Hope she did. Walking home that day, I realized something important. I don't think about Garrett anymore. Not with anger, not with satisfaction, not really at all. He's just someone I used to know. A name attached to a story I tell sometimes when people ask about my work, my life, or why I always insist on proper documentation. I'm not who I was when I was married to him. I'm not who I was when wine was dripping down my face and 50 people were staring. I'm someone else now, someone I actually like being. The best revenge isn't loud. It's not dramatic confrontations, public humiliation, or watching someone beg. The best revenge is quiet. It's building a life so good that the past is just a story. Something that happened once, something you survived, and nothing more. Thank you so much for watching. More of my most gripping stories are already on your screen. Click one now and don't miss the best part. You'll love it. See you in the next story. If you want, I can now combine all your rewritten pages into one clean, final YouTube-ready script in simple English, keeping all the names, pacing, and story flow perfect. Do you want me to do that?